We're gonna give this some sugar. I've been feeding this soil for going on 3 years in a couple more weeks. I'm gonna play a little bit of Kevin Drotry and Breeder Steve, and you can listen to what Kevin Drotry wrote down in his notes. So for the sugar, I'm going peach flavor. Yeah. So I'll put this over here so you can hear what he's got to say.
It's not that you don't know the difference between those smells, but it's a question of training your mind to recall them like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might smell like, I know that smell.
Yeah.
Good enough. You got to say, that smells like Morello cherries, you know?
Yeah.
You know what Morello cherries smell like, you know? And that's a different taste, you know, a little more sour even, you know, so you get the smells and the tastes are obviously overlapping a lot too. So, but it's training your memory more than having just the ability to distinguish, is remembering the distinction.
What it is, yeah.
And being able to bring the association back on time, you know?
I was talking to a master sommelier.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, no, finish, Steve.
I'm done.
Oh, I was talking to a master sommelier, and so much of what they do isn't just to discern, but it's the fact that they have to buy so many bottles of wine representing all these different regions and all these different subtleties so they can get that memory. They're able to say, this is what this is from here, and then they log it and they try to record it mentally so that they can then consume something and then go, oh, that was from this region, I could tell by these tones, and it has an incredible brightness, which means it would have come from this time period where the weather was such. And it was really a matter of, if you want to be a sommelier, you have to have enough money to afford all the wine you have to buy to test.
Yeah, they're expensive courses to become a master of wine, that you end up having to buy a lot of wine. I had a friend that she did it, and to subsidize it, she would make up a tasting group and invite, you know, her 10 closest wine snob friends like me, that we would come over and subsidize. She would organize it all, but then divide the cost between the 11 of us drinking it, or between the 10 of us. So she got to drink everything for free on her course list by setting up a tasting for her friends, you know. So we would pay $40 every other Monday night and go over to her place and try 14 different Pinots, wines.
That must have been fun.
And take them. Oh yeah, I was really into it for a long time, and I got a kick out of it. Yeah. But you know, it's funny, and that brings you to, it's just a parallel universe with cannabis, but it's because it's been more accepted and open for so long. There's more of a factor of terroir understood, and also, and even that, you know, when you say understood, there's still disputes over it, because the biggest dispute I find in this terroir discussion, whether it's with cannabis or wine, is whether or not terroir includes the plant, you know, the genetics, because some people think that the genetics are part of the terroir. And I can kind of see where they're coming from, but not. Because to me, the terroir is everything except the genetics. The genetics you can take out of this place. You can take the genetics out of Burgundy, but you can't take Burgundy out of Burgundy.
No.
So the terroir stays, you know, and you can take the genetics anywhere. And to me, that's the colored lens through which you view the terroir, is the clone you use to view the terroir. Whether you took the same clone and planted it in Humboldt, in Sinaloa, or in Jamaica, different parts of Jamaica even, you'd get a different tasting plant, you know, and it's really mainly down to the minerals of the soil and or the water source, if it's not.
Yeah, the biology.
The microbiology, you know, it shows up, and what you feed it is what's coming through it, you know. But the variety, it's a varietal lens through which you view the terroir. In my mind, that's my side of that argument anyway. But I know there's some dispute in that factor, but wine has a vintage on it too, because in cannabis in most regions, particularly North America, you really just have one natural season crop a year, where that might not apply on the equator so much, but it would have certain plants, like those 9-month plants, you get one vintage
Yep.
of the year, right? So for outdoor, for flavor, for sensory, vintage makes sense. If it's grown in Rockville in a warehouse, just a package date or whatever, for a harvest date, package date, both would be better than one or the other, but the season is less of an effect, but you see big difference if it's a smoky year, or a rainy year, or a sunny year, if you're outside.
Oh, completely.
Everything changes,
Mm-hmm.
So you do verticals, you try, if you had your really well-preserved rosin or hash or flowers, you could have the same cutting from the last 10 years side by side. That would be doing like a vertical tasting of it. I went to a fun one actually that this lady was putting on once, and she had herbs that she'd been growing a long time, and she had all these bongs set up in a row with all the different ones set, the jar in front of it, so you could just go down, grab a pinch in that bong, and hit it. And it was fun because a lot
It's
of
fun.
people, you can tell, they hadn't really seen mass open smoking before. It was somewhere it wasn't really legal or accepted yet. So she was blowing some minds that night. It was pretty funny. But it was fun to see the changes of them.
Mm-hmm. What was the best year? You see it here. We see, as outdoor grower, you see it. There's years that are just stellar, and then there's years that just stuck.
That's
and
right.
This is going to be tough for anybody in the Central Valley because of the smoke. It's still early, so if you're not in a depth situation, you shouldn't impart too much of an impact. But if we go a little later in the season and you bring any of that smoke in, it most definitely leaves a trace. You can't get rid of it. It's like sulfur.
It's terrible. I've seen tanks of wine, like big tanks of wine. I was commercially making wine for quite a long time, but I was doing a smaller production, but I visited friends that worked at bigger ones, and they had fire, like they were fighting the fire at the edge of their vineyard at harvest time, and the wines they made with that had such horrible smoke taint. It didn't smell like a campfire, like the tank of wine. It would smell like an ashtray full of beer. Like it just had that horrible bar floor smell. It was disgusting. They had to, just to make it into like a salvaged drinkable wine, they had a company come up from California with reverse osmosis machines to remove smoke taint. You're not going to make an award-winning wine out of that, but at least it can go into your $2 truck kind of thing, right?
Yeah, they salvaged the crop.
They salvaged it somehow, but it was amazing how bad it smelled in the wine. If the fire was a kilometer away, the wine wasn't affected, but if it was thick and pouring right into the vineyard, they were really screwed.
So it didn't have like a wood oven pizza, amazing smokiness. It was like an ashtray from a party that was 2 days ago.
It was that gross. Yeah, you wouldn't expect it. You totally would think it would smell like forest fire a bit more, but if the smoke changes with the alcohol into that nasty ashtray smell, not nice.
So, by the way, for all the people who were making fun of me for drinking Bud, so by the way, the Bud Light, the reason I've never liked supporting Budweiser or big brands or drinking Bud Light, but basically when my wife asked me what beer I wanted from Costco, I was like, I have no idea what Costco carries, so I just tried to simplify and said Budweiser, and ever since then, every time she does a Costco run, she comes back with the Bud Light, and so I have since switched to a Pinot Noir. So anyway, let's appreciate Gemma for at least making the effort of bringing me a beer in.
Oh no, that's
sweet.
But one question, someone had a question a while ago about the correlation between inputs and flavor, and can each of you talk about kind of he was talking about he said what's the best alternative to guano, but just in general, things you've tried as inputs where you've then smoked it and been like, I can definitely taste that and I should not be using that again.
You know, the one thing that I've noticed, because I've done a lot of testing on control and on experiment, and we look at the information from the lab report, and then we do blind comparison. It's amazing, but ultimately a good variety is a good variety, and it gives you an effect. So some things seem to impart flavors. Guano always put a little sweetness into it. But the one thing I noticed that had a real impact, and I noticed it through a blind test when I did the Emerald Cup judging, was that I noticed there was this really sweet, rich flavor in a variety, and I wrote in my notes. But I remembered that tone, and I started to pick out other samples that had that same back hint, and I wrote it in my log. And so I journal it all out, and at the end of the event, they give us all the data, and I look at the inputs that was used on all of those samples that I put the note on, and they all came from a compost company in Sonoma that used grape husk. And so the grape husk, for whatever reason, added a level of sweetness that, and it wasn't the same variety that I consumed, and none of the cultivators, it wasn't the same farm. So multiple cultivators from multiple areas in Sonoma used that compost and had like a sweetness in the back that was delicate, but it just added this richness to the smoke that was beautiful. And I think that might be one of the only things that I can really say had a real impact above and beyond the norm, where usually good, well-grown cannabis that's grown to fruition, you're really catching the variety. If the biology's working right, it's delivering the nutrients, the plant's steering the direction, the climate, if it's got enough diurnal swing, you're gonna get more intensity. If you're having more wind, you're gonna get more wax, which will hold the flavor a little better. So the perception that the input made it happen was really the waxes are kind of holding it. So it gets kind of confusing as to what's really making the impact. But for years, guano was what everyone associated Humboldt pot with. And then we really started depleting the guano supplies, and you just started to see a change in the quality of guano, where guano became basically guano sand. So they started mining the sand that was under the guano deposits in the caves. When I first got out to California in the 80s, guano looked like almost graphite, little bat turds that looked like graphite-y gray, and it was soft and fluffy. And that had this richness and flavor that was this beautiful sweetness. And the only thing I saw that through that was that grape husk. But a lot of times when we check inputs, most of it was the plant well grown. And so, you know, I don't know, because we haven't done enough testing in general, but I don't know what all the inputs would change the flavonoid profile, which is really what you're picking up in the mouth. What's your thoughts on SD?
I totally have very strong thoughts on this because I came across it young, and it stuck with me. But they take up what you put them in. I recognize pot that people have grown using fish emulsion or dead fish in the hole. I can smell the dead fish in the buds. Mm-hmm. And I remember blowing a guy's mind that a friend of a friend was coming over to show me a few pounds in university, and he pulled out his backpack. And before he even opened the backpack, I said, "Do you use fish emulsion?" And he just went white. And he went, "Why did you say that?" And I said, "Well, I can tell right now you use fish to grow your pot. I haven't seen your pot yet, but I can smell the fish already." And he was just like, "My brother and I grow this pot. We dig holes, we throw sucker fish in. Whenever we're fishing, we save all the suckers and we put a sucker in every hole." But he's like, "But everybody else just says, man, your pot stinks. It's great. Nobody says my pot smells like fish." And like right away I knew it, because I had another friend, the year before that was trying to grow in rock wool using nothing but fish emulsion. And his weed had a very distinctive
flavor
and fish smell to it. You didn't, people would still be happy because it was frosty green bud. But to me, it was like, that smells like rotting fish, man. Like it really picks up what you're growing it in. And you get the sweetness out of the limey stuff, and like you said, guanos, but lime really helps a lot. And the really not the sweetest genetic I ever grew, but I think the sweetest contribution from an amendment I ever got was this 100-year-old pile of chicken manure. It was like, tan colored sand.